And here we go with a Planet Doug behind the scenes video. I have my GoPro set up. As I've talked about before, I don't have my Olympus camera with me, so I'm just using my GoPro Hero 12, and it's mounted somewhat precariously on a little tripod, kind of a Frankenstein's monster array that I have in front of me, and I'm monitoring it on my smartphone. So I can control the GoPro through the GoPro Quick app. And oddly enough, I mentioned last time that when I set this up, I remember there was a zoom feature. I could set up the camera and then on the screen I could zoom in and out. And I wasn't able to find that last time. And yet this time, as soon as I turned on the GoPro and launched the Quick app, it was there. There was a slider on the right-hand side and I could zoom in and out and get the framing how I liked it. So anyway, yeah, always the very first things on my mind every morning are always technical, because what I did right now is I set up a GoPro preset to shoot this in a hotel room kind of video. So I set it at 1080p, linear field of view, 25 frames a second. Everything is like very basic and standard across the board. For a video like this, maybe there's no reason to shoot in 4K. Who knows? I'm experimenting with all these different settings, and for this morning I decided to shoot in 1080p. And of course I have the audio here on the Rode Wireless Go. And in this behind the scenes video, I'm only going to be talking about what I've been doing here in Ho Chi Minh City. When I was hanging out in Port Dickson and Kuala Lumpur, I had more time on my hands, I guess. I was watching other YouTube videos, I was reading, watching TV shows and movies, and surfing the internet, and then I had more things to talk about. So I had other components to my behind the scenes ramblings. But here in Ho Chi Minh City, to be honest, all I've been doing is going out exploring and shooting video. And so I haven't been watching any other YouTube videos. I have nothing else to talk about other than my own experiences here in Vietnam so far. And I think in my last behind the scenes video, I ended my stories with my first day. I talked about flying to Vietnam, and then on the very first day, I spent a day with someone that I know here through my YouTube channel, Rod, and we met for lunch and did a kind of informal bus tour of some districts of Ho Chi Minh City and had coffee out on the streets. And then I had banh mi, had a very, very interesting day, and I talked about all of that. I think mainly I was talking about the flight to come here, and that was quite an adventure. But since then, I've been doing a lot. On one of the days, I don't know if I've talked about this or not, I spent the afternoon, or I spent the day more or less in my neighborhood. I went first to the Little HaNoi Egg Coffee Cafe. And this is something I just spotted on Google Maps. I was looking at my neighborhood and I thought, oh, egg coffee, I've heard of that, but I don't really know what it is. So I decided to go to this egg coffee place called Little HaNoi. Enjoyed it very much. It's right across the park from my hotel, and it turns out that the coffee is in a smallish cup. The bottom half is thick black coffee, and then the top half is just a thick layer of egg yolk, all creamed up with sweetener and stuff like that. So it's egg cream coffee, basically. And at a really nice setting up on the second floor with a balcony, a lot of interesting decor on the inside, photographs of Vietnam's countryside, and it was all foreigners there, visitors like myself from all over the world, tourists and backpackers, and just hung out there, had my egg coffee, and I had some kind of a toasty sort of sandwich as well. Both very good, a little bit on the expensive side if you compare it to local food, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed that very much. And then I think I was back in my hotel editing video during the midday heat, and then I decided to go out looking for pho, and I picked out a place in advance, a noodle shop, and it was a local place, had good reviews on Google Maps, and I went there for a bowl of typical Vietnamese pho. And the whole time I was taking video. So my idea was to make a video about snacking in my local neighborhood. So I shot video at the egg coffee place, and then I went to the pho place, shot video. And then I believe for dinner, what did I do? I went to a banh mi place again, I think. And I believe I shot video about that. So that was kind of the whole day, hanging out in my neighborhood, trying out some of the local restaurants, the local cafes, things like that. And I enjoyed that very much. Maybe at the end of that day, maybe it was at the end of that day, I also went out to meet a friend, I'm not sure. But either that night or the next night, someone else that I've gotten to know through my YouTube channel, someone who actually came to visit me when I was living in Mae Sot, Thailand. He's here in Ho Chi Minh City at the same time. We just happened by coincidence to be here at the same time. And he reached out to me and said he wanted to show me, during my time here, he wanted to show me some non-touristy parts of the city. So we arranged to meet at the Vitel Tower. And it's an area that he knows well. We were just going to have a drink there, a cup of coffee. This is in the evening, and also have a meal somewhere around there. And I decided to walk there. It was about 2 kilometers away, and I plotted a route through some narrow alleyways and laneways. And that was a lot of fun. That was really interesting. I had my GoPro running at the same time. Walked through these narrow alleyways. No matter what direction you go in, these laneways are just jammed with homes. They're residential alleyways, but also filled with cafes and restaurants, street side food stalls, everything, all kinds of interesting things. So it's a lot of fun just to walk along through these neighborhoods. And I walked the full 2 kilometers to Vitel Tower, met up with my friend. We had a nice glass of flowery kind of iced tea and some Chinese food that he had delivered by Grab. Now that I'm telling the story, I feel like I've already told it, but I'm going through it very quickly, so I think that's okay. And then it was later in the evening by the time we parted company, 9:30, something like that. It was dark, and then I just walked all the way back to this hotel in the dark, going along the same sort of really busy, very interesting laneways and streets. And just walking in the dark and then taking video of everything going on around me. I enjoyed that quite a bit. On another day, the same friend, actually the next morning, my friend arranged for me to see another district that he knew about, and he invited me for breakfast to the UCC Coffee Roastery. And I figured out where that was. I feel like I've missed a day in here already, but it doesn't matter. I can jump around in terms of the days and the experiences, because by then I'd already gone somewhere by bus, I believe, by local bus. So I had some experience with that, I think. But anyway, when I met up with my friend at UCC Coffee Roastery, I decided to go there by local bus. And my local bus experience has been quite interesting. The main thing I discovered is that you get all the information you need from Google Maps. So I just say, this is where I want to go. What are my directions to get there? And then they tell me the local buses that go. And when I started this, I thought this was not going to be accurate information. How could it be? But it turns out it has been quite accurate. And I've been able to pinpoint where I get on the bus, what bus I can take, how much the bus is going to cost, and shows me the bus stops along the way. So when I went to meet my friend, I went there by local bus. Turned out to be quite easy to do. You just have to invest a little bit of time to figure it out, then walk to the bus stop. And the bus stop had a big map showing the city, and then all the routes that all the different buses that stop at that bus stop showed you the route that they follow. And the bus I was hoping to take was on the map. And according to the route on the map, it looked like it was going exactly where it said on Google Maps it was going to go. So I just waited there until my bus showed up. The key thing here is that you have to wave it down. The buses don't automatically stop. So you have to look down the street and keep an eye on all the buses. Because when my bus, when it came, it was actually in the middle lane, like 3 or 4 lanes over from the side of the road. And I thought, oh, there's no way he's going to pull over in time. And I felt a little bit rude to wave him down because I knew how difficult it was going to be, but that seemed to be the way you do things. So I was like waving, I put my arm way up in the air, looking directly at that bus, like, and then the guy saw me, the bus driver saw me, and sure enough, he hit the blinker and just moved over 3 lanes, pulled up there. I climbed on the bus. There were a lot of empty seats. The buses have not been crowded. They've been comfortable. They're not even noisy. One thing I've often commented on, and I commented on this when I was in Kuala Lumpur, that city buses can be quite rickety and rattly if they go over any kind of a bump. There's tons of things on the bus that make a loud rattling sound. And on these buses here in Ho Chi Minh City, they're all perfectly quiet. They don't rattle for some reason. They're a little bit smaller. They're more like big vans than huge city buses so far. Maybe that's the difference. But anyway, I hopped on board. I figured out that most of the time the buses cost 6,000 dong, so I have 6,000 dong ready, hand it to the guy, it gives me a little bus ticket, and I'm all done. And then I just plot where the bus goes on Google Maps, and when I got near the UCC Coffee Roastery, I just, this bus, I don't think it had a button, so I just went to the door and I looked at there's always a bus driver and a bus helper, and the helper is the guy who deals with all the passengers. And I looked at the helper and indicated whatever the next stop is, that's where I'd like to get off. And he told the driver, and the driver pulled over, and I hopped off, and easy as can be. Comfortable, smooth, fast, great way to get around Ho Chi Minh City. And when you get off these buses, quite often right at the bus stop, there are going to be a whole bunch of food stalls. And I was meeting my friend for breakfast, so I really shouldn't eat anything, but at the same time, I was really hungry, and I got there pretty early, so I thought, if I have the chance, maybe I can have something to eat. And I'm walking along the street, and I'm taking video, and I found one stall where they seemed to be doing something quite interesting. They had a bowl of some kind of batter with a ladle, and then they ladled out a very thin layer of batter, like a crepe, not quite a pancake, but a very, very thin crepe. So they were on a big griddle, and then they added a whole bunch of stuff to it, and then folded it over and rolled it up into a kind of spring roll. And it looked delicious, and I was hungry, so everything would have looked delicious. And while I was standing there taking video of this whole operation, there was a young man, a student of some type, I believe, who looked at me and said, oh, in English, he said to me, oh, would you like to try this? And I said, absolutely, I would. And then he ordered it for me. I paid for it. It was my order, but he helped me out in placing my order. He spoke to them in Vietnamese and said, yeah, the foreign man here would like to try this, and he put in an order for me, and then I paid for it, and this guy got on his motorcycle and went away. Very, very nice of him. I sat down at a little table, plastic table with plastic chairs. Not very comfortable places to sit, particularly for someone of my height, my long legs, and all of my gear, my bags and camera stuff and everything. So it's not a very comfortable place to sit. But I took a seat there, and then they brought over an amazing plate, because that's something I've picked up on in Vietnam. If you order a snack, because as far as I knew, all I was going to get were the two, I thought I was only going to get one spring roll sort of thing, because the guy said to me, oh, just one? And I said, yeah, just one. But it turned out he put in one order, and a complete order was 2 of these rolls. And it turns out on the inside, it was a kind of meat with mushrooms and spicing. Really, really tasty. So I got 2 of those, plus salad, plus big squares of tofu, plus. So it was like a big plate filled, and there's like a crunchy thing as well. A really nice presentation, and they also have a big picture of what they said was fish sauce. And the guy on the motorcycle, he actually, before he left, he told me, make sure you add the fish sauce. And then I added fish sauce. But then when the man who made the meal for me, or the woman who worked there, I'm not sure, walked by my table, they made another point. I was like, make sure, fish sauce, you gotta add that fish sauce. So I added even more of it, and it was really good, the fish sauce. If someone says to me, you have to add the fish sauce, I'm normally a little bit suspect, because I don't have good associations with fish. Growing up on the Great Lakes, we're not big fish eaters. We don't generally, I don't think anybody eats the fish. There are no fisheries on the Great Lakes that I'm aware of. And my only childhood memory of fish would be dead fish rotting on the sand. You go swimming, and then you're swimming on the beach as a kid running around, and suddenly it's like, oh, what's that horrible smell? And it's always a dead, rotting fish. So when someone says, oh, do you want seafood? I'm like, my instant reaction is, no, I do not want seafood, because when I think of fish, that's my automatic association. I don't think of fresh ocean catch. I think of rotting carcasses on the beaches of the Great Lakes. But anyway, so I'm always surprised when they say, have some fish sauce. I'm expecting something stinky and fermented and sour and terrible, but this was a sweet sauce of some kind. So I just poured it all over and then devoured this snack. It was so good. And then when I met up with my friend at UCC, he treated me to their version of the big breakfast. Scrambled eggs and bacon and toast, and yogurt with nuts in it, and coffee, the whole set. And I had no trouble at all polishing it off. I could have had 2 of each, and I still would have been okay. I'm back. The GoPro battery died. I changed the battery, and I might look significantly different because I'm such a dummy. It wasn't until I was changing the battery that I realized I have a window. So I've now opened the curtains, and natural light is now flooding into the room. So I may look better, I may look worse. These days I'm starting to think with this face, the darker the better, the blurrier the better. You don't want 4K high sharpness with bright light on this face anymore. That face that might have looked good in those conditions is from decades ago. But anyway, so I was just saying that I enjoyed the breakfast very much, the snack and the big breakfast at UCC Coffee Roastery. And right there, there was a big set of residential buildings, like condominium towers. And my friend used to live in one of those in Vietnam. And that's how he knew about this area. He knew about the neighborhood. And it's right on the river, right on the Saigon River. He said that those buildings were the very first residential apartment complexes in the city. The first big towers filled with apartment buildings, with apartments. So that was kind of cool. We went walking around there. We grabbed a coffee at, I think it was at Highlands Coffee. All over Ho Chi Minh City, I'm seeing Highlands Coffee and Wayne's Coffee. These seem to be the 2 biggest chains here, and then you've got Starbucks, and then all the local and neighborhood ones. But we grabbed a nice coffee from one of them. I think it was Highlands. That seems to be the popular place to go to. And then we went walking along the river, just checking out the scenery from there. And then when I came back to District 1, I decided to do something different, because I'd taken a local bus 2 times. Because I believe that was my 2nd time. And then I decided to take a Grab. And I hadn't taken Grab yet, because I do love local transportation. Here they don't have a subway system. They're building one, and it may open next year. But generally, local buses is the way that people get around. Local buses and motorcycles and cars. So anyway, I decided to try a Grab, and I figured out a way to get Grab working for me, but I have Grab on one of my phones, but that phone doesn't have a SIM card, so I have to take my SIM card phone, set up a hot Wi-Fi hotspot, then take my Grab phone, connect it to this phone. So I basically have to use two phones in order to get a Grab. And I did, summoned a Grab. My friend was walking me through the process. Everything worked out really well. I'm usually a little bit leery about these things because the appeal for me of Grab or Gojek or anything is that you don't have the language barrier. You're doing it through technology. You don't have to talk about where you are, where to be picked up, where you're going, or how much it costs. You don't have to debate or discuss any of these things because it's all done by the app. But I have found in most countries that where I've tried Grab, they always end up calling you anyway. So it ends up being no advantage. Like in Indonesia, for some reason, every time I use the local Gojek or Grab, they didn't seem to know how to use the app. They knew they had someone calling them for a ride, but then for whatever reason, they couldn't tell from the app who I was or where to pick me up or anything. So then as soon as I book a Grab, now my phone rings and I have someone speaking to me in Indonesian asking me, where are you and where do you want to go? And I just found that really frustrating because the whole point of the app is we don't have to talk about these things. I input all those details onto the map. You should be able to see it, right? And nobody in Indonesia could explain to me why this wasn't a possibility, and they always had to phone me. But anyway, when I did it here, let me raise this camera up a little bit. I'm still just experimenting with this whole GoPro thing. I think I can tilt it down just a little bit. Yeah. It's just that it's very precarious. My tripod base is not very strong. It's not very big. So the higher the camera goes, the more tilty it becomes. So I have to keep an eye on it. But here, when I did it here in Ho Chi Minh City, that was the only time I've used Grab so far. It worked out really well. And my friend told me that one trick that he uses is when he summons the Grab, then he has the pickup point marked on the map, but then he'll take a picture of where he is. And there's a facility for doing that in Grab where you take a picture through the app. So that's what I did. I opened up the app and then I said, take a picture. And I took a picture of UCC Coffee Roastery, and that was sent automatically to the driver. But it turned out he didn't need it because just as I was hitting send the photo, he rode right up. It's like, zip, he was there. And he didn't call me. We didn't have to have a big discussion. When I got there, he didn't ask me where I wanted to go. He knew where I wanted to go because Adenia Hotel, District 1, everything was fine. And then I put on the helmet, and I wanted to take video of the experience, of course. And I was saying goodbye to my friend, and the Grab driver sort of waited patiently for me. And then had a little bit of trouble getting on because, as I said, I was using two phones. So I had one phone in one pocket and the other phone in my other pocket. And then when I tried to sit down on the scooter, I couldn't really bend my legs because these phones are quite large and they're in my pockets and they kind of jammed between my thighs and my waist. So when I tried to sit down, it was like, I was trying to hold on to the GoPro. And so it took a while for me to get settled. I had to take one of the phones, take my knapsack off my back and take one phone and put it away and readjust my other phone so that I could actually sit, on the scooter, on the motorcycle. But the driver, he waited patiently until I got settled. And then we zoomed off. And I had that funny moment later on. I was reviewing the video because you think you're doing something really cool. So there I am, shooting a video for Planet Doug. I've got my Hero 12, and I'm on a Grab in Saigon, a very romantic city for people from the West. In Canada, we think of, ooh, Saigon. That name conjures up so much to us. just like Yangon, Myanmar, Vietnam, Saigon. Yeah, we have a lot of associations with that name. So there I am, I'm thinking, man, I must look so cool on the back of this Grab, zooming through Saigon. I'm shooting video. And of course, I looked at the video later on, and I look as far from cool as you can imagine. I just look dumb because I've got this helmet on, but rather than looking cool in my motorcycle helmet, this little tub sitting on my head. It was sort of on the back of my head. The wind kind of blew it backwards. So it wasn't even like sitting on my head. It was like cupping the back of my head, and I got my hair sticking out, and I look so big on the scooter, and I'm perched up on the scooter, and I've got the driver in front of me, and I'm holding the camera, and I decided to put one hand on his shoulder just to hold on, so that if he brakes suddenly, I don't slam into him. If he takes off, I don't fall off the back of the scooter. You got to hold on to something, but I've got one hand resting on the driver's shoulder, and I'm holding this. And I think I'm looking pretty darn cool riding a Grab in Saigon, but in the video, I look so goofy, like this giant praying mantis perched on this tiny scooter with this dumb helmet on my head. It was pretty funny. I shot video as we were driving along, and just as we got back to District 1, I had another funny moment because we stopped at a red light at a big intersection, and while we were waiting for the light to turn green, another foreigner on a Grab motorcycle pulled up beside me and then a little bit ahead of me. And it was a woman, long blonde hair, very attractive woman. And we just sort of made eye contact. We're both on a Grab. And it is that weird thing, I talk about this a lot, where if you're a Caucasian, in particular, a Caucasian foreigner in another country having this big adventure, and then you're walking down the street and you happen to see another Western visitor walking towards you, do you do the foreigner nod? Like, do you acknowledge each other? There's no reason to say hello. You don't know this person. They're complete strangers. But clearly, you do have something in common. You're both from the same part of the world. You're both here in wherever you are. This happened a lot in Kuala Lumpur. And you see another foreigner walking towards you down the street. And I always go for the foreigner nod. I like to acknowledge them. Just make eye contact. Hey, how you doing? And then you walk past each other. No, there's no biggie. Quite often, though, in KL, I would give the foreigner nod. Hey, how you doing? And the other foreigner would just ghost me. They just walk right by. They don't look at me. They don't acknowledge me. They don't say hello. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One could be that this foreigner actually lives in Kuala Lumpur, and they do not want to be associated with a goofy backpacker person. It's like, come on, I live here. This is my city. I'm not going to say hello to every foreigner I meet on the street. So they just ghost me. Or they can be a backpacker who's too cool. They don't want another foreigner messing up their big adventure. There they are in Ho Chi Minh City riding a Grab motorcycle, having this big adventure. But then if you acknowledge right beside you another foreigner, just like you, doing the exact same thing, there's a certain type of foreigner that thinks that reduces the value of what they're doing. They don't want to acknowledge. They want to feel like they're having this unique adventure that nobody else has, which is ridiculous, of course, because here in District 1, there are thousands of us. This is the tourism area, and again, walking street, I'll talk about that in a minute. There are hundreds, if not thousands of us, and we're all doing the exact same thing. So if you're here in Saigon and you think you're having some kind of a unique adventure, you're doing things that no one has ever done before, well, just step out onto the street. I can go out on the street right now. I walk down the street of my hotel, and I will see dozens and dozens of people who look exactly like me, and they're here having banh mi sandwiches, they're having pho, they're having Grab rides. We're all doing exactly the same things. So if you refuse to acknowledge other foreigners because that kind of harshes your vibe, yeah, you should just get over yourself. You're not doing anything special. everybody is doing the same thing that you're doing. So anyway, there I was on my Grab, and then this other Grab pulls up beside me, and then the woman sort of looked in my direction. We made eye contact, and this is all in the video. I said something to her like, hey, we're both having our big Grab adventure today. And then I really liked it that she was willing to acknowledge me. She's like, yeah, you know, this is the most fun thing I've done in Vietnam so far. I'm really having such a good time. And we had a little 5-second chat, little small talk chat. And then the light turned green, and then she zoomed off ahead of me. And then I'm still shooting video, and I turned to the GoPro, and I made a small joke about how my Grab driver is probably very annoyed right now. It's like the other Grab driver gets the beautiful young blonde woman, and who does he get on his motorcycle? He gets me, and he's probably looking at the other motorcycle going, huh, how come I never get passengers like that? How do I always get the doofus on the back? the praying mantis perched there. Anyway, I thought that was kind of funny. And yeah, he did a U-turn. I was trying to make it easy. I was trying to anticipate the traffic because we were going this way, and then my hotel was on the other side of the street. So I was going to tell the guy, oh, you can drop me off anywhere. As soon as I'm in the neighborhood of my hotel, you can just drop me off. I can walk the rest of the way. You don't have to drop me off right at the front door. But there didn't seem a chance to do that. And then we kind of rode right up to my hotel. And then he did a quick U-turn. He actually did a U-turn across traffic. He's an expert, obviously. He grew up here, and he's a skilled Grab driver. And he just did a quick U-turn right there, and then dropped me off in front of my hotel. And then I couldn't resist. I'm shooting a video about this experience for YouTube. I'm recording a relive video all the time, plotting the routes that I'm following. So I wanted to get a selfie with my Grab driver. So in for a penny, in for a pound is what they say. If you're going to be a goofy tourist, you might as well go all the way. So I said to the guy, hey, can we take a picture together? And I got out my phone, and we're like, hey. I'm taking the classic selfie with my Grab driver. I took that selfie. And yeah, so I enjoyed that quite a bit. My one and only experience taking a Grab, but it worked out really well, better than I expected. The first time I took the bus, I think it was the day before, and I decided to go to the History Museum. There's a whole bunch of museums in Ho Chi Minh City, and I plan on visiting a bunch of them. I enjoy museums. And one thing I like to do when I first get to a new city is go to the History Museum. And then you get a bird's eye view of that country. You get a sense of context in terms of culture and history and geography. And then you can dive into the modern world, but it's nice to have a little bit of a background, and going to the local history museum is a good way to do that. Kuala Lumpur, for example, has a very good national history museum. And I think for anyone visiting the city, that would be an ideal place to start. Before you go to the Twin Towers, before you go to Batu Caves, before you go anywhere, first day, go to the History Museum, get a sense of context. And then I think you'll understand what you're looking at a lot better. So that's what I did here. And it turns out there are a couple of museums. You can get confused about them. I figured this out. There's one museum about the history of Ho Chi Minh City. It's only about the city. I haven't been there yet. The one I wanted to go to was about the history of the country, but it was called the Ho Chi Minh History Museum or something like that. So in fact, it's easy to get the two confused. One is a history of Vietnam museum, and the museum happens to be in Ho Chi Minh City. The other one is actually about the history of Ho Chi Minh City, but they have almost identical names. But I went to the right one, and it's near it's like a big park or botanical gardens there were actually another museum in there, like I think there's a zoo and a natural history museum with all the skeletons of animals native to Vietnam, things like that. But I planned only to go to the history museum. I can usually do one attraction a day, and then I'm exhausted. So I planned my day around going to the history museum, and that's it. So I took a bus. That was my first local bus. Again, on Google Maps, I figured out what bus to take. And it took me alongside the river, which was quite interesting. And I figured out where to get dropped off. I hopped off the bus. Lovely bus ride, had no issues at all. On Google Maps, it keeps saying 7,000 dong. So actually, I keep getting 7,000 dong prepared in advance. But every time I've given it to the ticket taker, he always gives me 1,000 change. So it always seems to be 6,000 total. I got off the bus, and then right near the park where the museum was located, I saw a little coffee stall. And when I first saw it, I kind of had this idea, oh, local traditional coffee place, let's pop in here. And my memory of Vietnamese coffee from decades ago was quite different. They were all very local, very traditional coffee places. And the coffee was served in a special tin unit where you've got a tin cup in the bottom, I think, and they fill it with condensed sweetened milk. And then they put a coffee filter drip mechanism on top. It also seems to be made out of tin, and they add coffee there. And then they pour boiling water into the top, and then it drips down through and then fills up the container at the bottom. That's my memory of Vietnamese coffee. So every time I've gone out looking for local coffee, I've been looking for that kind of coffee system. But Vietnam has moved on since then. Vietnam is all about Starbucks, Highlands Coffee, Wayne Coffee. And then it turned out that this little coffee thing at the side of the road by the park, it was actually a very modern coffee place. He even had his own little espresso machine. So when I ordered a coffee from him, he did the whole thing like you were at a Starbucks, grinding the beans and then putting them into that little silver or stainless steel thing, using a jammer to jam it down nice and tight, and then he hooks it in there and then turns on the machine. You get all that noise and steam. It was like you were in a modern gourmet coffee shop, and that's how he made the coffee. And whatever I ordered, it ended up being basically an espresso, a shot of dark, black, thick coffee. He served it to me in a big paper cup. So he handed me the cup, and I did one of those things where my body was expecting a certain weight because I'd ordered a cup of coffee and I was getting a big cup. So all my muscles were pre-programmed to lift this heavy cup of coffee. And then when I picked it up, I just about threw it into the air because there was nothing in it. It was empty. There was just a little layer of thick coffee sludge in the bottom. And it wasn't really what I wanted. I wanted the whole hot cup of coffee. I could sit there, sip on it for a while. But anyway, I got this half an ounce of espresso, and I sat down in a little plastic chair and I just went, all right, coffee's done. But I mean, it tasted good. And I took a selfie with the coffee guy as well. And then from there, I walked into the museum. There was some confusion at the museum in terms of what was going on. It cost 30,000 dong, bargain of a lifetime. That's a little bit over $1 US, 30,000 dong. And there was none of this nonsense of $1 for local people, $1,000 for foreigners. They just had the same price for everybody, which I appreciate very much. So I got my ticket, I went in, beautiful courtyard area with, okay, just a second. Oop.
Change the room.
Okay, change the room. Okay, thank you very much. I'll change right now. my gosh, like, ooh, can you still see me? My GoPro is all tilted. I'm amazed. I'm having such a good time in Vietnam. Just the vibe of the place, so helpful and friendly on levels I'm never anticipating. This sort of operation in most other places I've been, recently Malaysia, doing something like this, changing rooms, all this kind of stuff, it would be very, very complicated and would end up being very difficult. And I can tell you that right now it's, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So basically I'm getting an hour late checkout from this room. And when I spoke to the woman down at the front desk, I automatically assumed that everything we talked about, she would completely forget, that nothing would happen. I would end up sitting up here for the longest time, and then I would have to go back down, and it would be a big disaster. There would be confusion. So I never expected this, where she just came up, the room is ready, and she knocked on the door and gave me the key to my new room and said, your new room is ready. You may now change rooms, take your time, just pack up and hop down one floor to the next room. I don't know why I'm so amazed at this, but for a low budget hotel like this kind of organization and efficiency and service, in my experience, it's almost unheard of. Wow. Anyway, I'm all packed up already. I don't know if you can see it. My backpack is ready to go, so I'm just going to shut down the GoPro, go down to the new room. They will have water. I ran out of water, so I have no more water left. And I'll have one of their instant packets of coffee, and I'll finish up my behind the scenes video. I'll be right back, and I'll show you my new room. I'm here, my new room, 405. There's just one floor down below. I think where I was on the 5th floor, there may have been 2 rooms. I only noticed one room, mine, room 502. But here on the 4th floor, there seemed to be 6 rooms in total. Mine is 405. And yeah, the transfer went very smoothly. All I did was carry my backpack down here, open the room, dropped off my bag. I went down to the lobby, gave them the key to my old room, and here I am. Like, no muss, no fuss. And just a lot of fun. So, quick room tour. I think in terms of the facilities, I would call it an upgrade, more or less. Everything seems to be in better condition. This is the room, large single bed, as I said, king or queen or whatever size that is. Got a desk over there, a little vanity, I guess you call that, with a light. Fan is in good condition. A couple of chairs over there. A little table over here, and that table is definitely going to move right over there. Going to become my bedside coffee table. Once I unpack, TV, wardrobe over here, fridge down there, and then in the bathroom, everything seems better and nicer. I didn't have anything like this. There's no hair dryer mounted on the wall, no body and hair stuff mounted on the wall, and everything is nice. Everything here is just cleaner and in better condition than up on the 5th floor. And water pressure. The only problem with my room upstairs was there's really no water pressure at all. There's just like a dribble coming out. This has normal, it's not like a Niagara Falls or anything, but enough water comes out of there that gets a normal shower. But yeah, the sink, everything is just in better condition. And I even get a little bit of style up there on the roof, which is kind of cool. The one big difference, we'll see how this plays out, is the window. Because upstairs I was looking out over the city, which I kind of like. Here I'm looking out onto another building. So there's really no view of any kind, and it remains to be seen what the noise levels are like. You never really know with noise how things are going to be, because there are 6 rooms here, and there could be a lot of people coming and going in the hallway, a lot of noise at night, slamming of doors. I was all by myself up on the 5th floor, which is how I like it. And all these rooms seem to have windows that open onto the hallway. So there's actually the hallway. So a lot of noise could come in through that window. But yeah, there it is. Don't think there's anything else to say. I'm going to unpack and settle in, and then I'll return with more behind the scenes stories. And we're back online, Planet Doug Studios, on a new precarious setup in a new room. And when I gave the room tour, one thing I didn't realize, no kettle. Oddly enough, up on the 5th floor, my room had a kettle. And here, while I was unpacking, I looked around and went, huh, no kettle. But that doesn't matter because I have my own kettle. And I boiled water for a cup of coffee. And this is one of the cups of 3-in-1 instant coffee that they supply. Yeah, it's not so heavy on the sugar, but it's definitely mostly sugar. So, as I said, that was a very pleasant experience, and I guess I have a very pessimistic attitude when it comes to anything like that. You're trying to just book a hotel room, change a hotel room, make an alteration into some kind of arrangement. I just automatically assume the worst, that everything's going to go wrong and it's going to turn into a giant problem that's going to last the entire day, if not several days. And that's how it often does work out for me in real life. But this particular transfer worked out really well. Now all I have to do is wait around to see if there are any gotcha moments in this room. One I mentioned already, that I don't know what the noise level is going to be like down here. It could be extremely noisy compared to where I was on the 5th floor, or it could be quieter, could be better in every way. I'm not sure. So where was I in my stories of my 6 days here in Vietnam? I think when the knock came on the door, I was just talking about going to the History Museum, and I just entered the courtyard, and it was a lovely courtyard there with a fish pond, koi pond sort of thing, a lot of greenery, a lot of trees, a lot of plants, and I noticed off in the corner there was a tea shop, which seemed to come at the end of your museum tour. So I already planned to stop off there to get a cup of tea of some kind. And there was also a coffee shop on the grounds of the museum. So the place seemed nicely put together. First impressions were good. Though as soon as I walked into the courtyard, I noticed on my left, there were buildings all around. So you're in a courtyard with a huge wall of building here, 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 all the way around you. But on the left, the building was completely covered in scaffolding and tarp. So it was clearly being renovated, rebuilt, something. And there's a big map right in front of me. And as far as I could tell, looking at the map, I'm still kind of confused about the orientation because it looked exactly like I was standing here in the middle of the courtyard, fish pond, tea shop, and then according to the map on my left was exhibit number 1. And then you go, of course, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, all the way from 1 to 18 exhibits, and it brings you around in a circle. I'm still trying to figure out why I was confused about this, or maybe it was incorrect, because according to that, exhibits 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 were all in this building that was being renovated, and it was completely sealed. There was no way into that building. So I thought, oh, a third of the museum is closed to the public. It looked that way. I was staring at the map, and I'm like orienting myself, and yeah, everything, it looks like everything is in that building, and I can't go into that building. And right in front of me, well, yeah, the map didn't make any sense, put it that way. But there was a room on my right, which was room 18. So according to the map, 1 was over here, and then you go in a circle, and then you exit from 18. But everything on my left was sealed off. So I thought, well, my only option is to go into exhibit 18, which technically is the last exhibit. but I have no choice in the matter. So I went into room 18, and it was all about the history of Buddhism, the spread of Buddhism from India throughout the rest of Asia. And they had a lot of statues in there, Buddhist statues, things like that. And I was in that room. Then I went into room 17, which was connected to 18, and 17 was completely empty. There were a whole bunch of exhibits, display cases around the room, but they were all cleared out. There was nothing in them. And there was some sort of a sign saying something about renovation or rebuilding. So I thought, oh, okay. So 17 is a no-go, and I just assumed I'd get to see maybe 2/3 of the museum, something like that. But then after room 17, I was in room number 1. I was like, I'm in the twilight zone here. Nothing is making any sense. But I went into room 18, the last one, 17, which was completely cleaned out, and on the other side of 17 was exhibit room number 1. And now suddenly I was going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way through the entire museum. So I was like, all right, whatever's going on here, that's what's happening. And the map, I guess, at the entrance either made no sense at all, or I just didn't understand it. And I'm willing to go with the idea that I just misunderstood it. I often do that with Google Maps. I'll look at the map and I see, oh, I need to go this way. So I go that way, walk 3 blocks, and then I realize, oh no, I was supposed to go that way. I'll do a 180-degree flip. I do that quite often. Even when I'm aware that I do it and I try not to do it, somehow or other I still end up doing it. So I thought at this museum, very easily I could have just misunderstood. But anyway, it all worked out in the end. I went to 18, then 17, and then I started at the beginning with room number 1. And room number 1 was all about prehistoric times, looking at the landmass of Vietnam, pre-human time, and then moving into the Stone Age, showing a lot of the stone arrowheads and spearheads and tools that were developed back in the Stone Age in Vietnam. And then you just move on from there into the Bronze Age. And the Bronze Age room, for me, was the most interesting. Why do I say that? Well, because it was understandable. It made sense to me. A lot of the other exhibits, I found it difficult to understand because Vietnam as a country has a very weird shape. I guess it developed that way because of the way the land is and the way history developed. But you've got the big, I guess, is it the Red River Delta to the north, a big bulge, a mountainous area there, a big Mekong River Delta area at the bottom, almost like 2 ends of a barbell, and then a very narrow coastal strip connecting them. And that is modern day Vietnam. And to me, logically, that feels like a modern invention, and that the people of the past, before Vietnam existed, they wouldn't have paid attention to those borders. Like it just would have been this big landmass as a whole, where like whatever, if you look at Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam, it's just a big roundish kind of area, a big block of land. And the people pre-Vietnam would have lived all over that whole block of land, if you follow my logic. And yet all the exhibits sort of focused on this modern map of Vietnam, the big bulge at the top, the bulge at the bottom, and the narrow strip, as if the people of Vietnam only inhabited that narrow strip. And yet I'm sure the people we were talking about sort of just lived all over the place, if you know what I mean. Anyway, I found it hard to sort of sort through that. But in this Bronze Room age, you did see the map of Vietnam as it is today, even though we were talking about millennia ago, whenever the Bronze Age was. But they divided the people into 3 groups. The northern Vietnamese, occupying the big bulge at the top, the southern, and then the people in the middle, central Vietnam, in that narrow strip. And they each had a different name. So they weren't the Vietnamese people they were actually 3 different groups. And I forget the names of them now, but one of the groups was the bronze drum was named after them, like the Nasong bronze drum or something like that. I just found the whole idea of this bronze drum quite interesting, because the way they described it, these people, it was either, I think it was the North Vietnamese, they invented the bronze drum, and then it spread throughout the rest of Asia. They drew arrows on the map showing how this bronze drum technology passed down through the land and then across the ocean to Indonesia and all these other islands around here. And I found that idea kind of interesting. And I also noticed similarities in burial rites, because when you go to places like islands in Indonesia or the Philippines, talking about the tribal groups in the mountains and in the hills, they often have burial customs involving wooden, like tree trunks that have been hollowed out, and you have 2 halves of this tree trunk, and then people were buried inside these coffins, wooden coffins made out of tree trunks, and then they were stacked up in caves and things like that. And you see that custom all over this part of the world, and I saw it at the museum as well, connected with these people that were either Vietnamese people or pre-Vietnamese people. They had the same sort of burial rites. So I was able to make some connections historically and culturally and musically between the Vietnamese people, the story of these people, and other peoples all around Southeast Asia. A lot of what I read was a little bit difficult to comprehend, and you couldn't really commit it to memory, because the museum really was a history museum, and they interpreted history as a series of governments, a series of dynasties. And then as you're reading all of the information, you got the name of somebody who founded this particular dynasty, and there were a bunch of wars where he conquered all of this land and formed this dynasty or dynasty. And then somebody invaded or someone revolted and created a new dynasty. And then there was a new one, just dynasty after dynasty, and with a new leader and a new name. And unless you're a scholar of Vietnamese history, you're not going to remember all these names. And there wasn't a lot of significance attached to these, except for the final one, the final dynasty right before the modern era of French Indochina and the Vietnam War, and now modern socialist Vietnam. So in that dynasty, the final one was called the Nguyen dynasty, and that was the final monarchy of Vietnam before we get into French Indochina, World War II, independence, and then the independence wars with the French and the Americans, and then the dividing of Vietnam into North Vietnam and South Vietnam, and then reunification afterwards. Before all of that came the Nguyen dynasty. And it's something to know about, because even as I walk around the city of Ho Chi Minh City, I see references to the Nguyen dynasty all the time. That name comes up everywhere.
Nguyen. Nguyen. Nguyen.
And it was apparently a very prosperous time, a time of some advancement in culture and art and technology, things like that, economics. So it was a very important dynasty, and it was the last one before the modern era, basically. So I got quite a bit out of the museum. As I said at the time, the theme and the focus on governments and dynasties, one overthrowing the next. Oh, here's a battle. Now this guy built up an army and he defeated this army. Now we have a new dynasty which lasted 70 years before he's defeated in a battle, and there's another dynasty. That doesn't really tell you a lot about the country. It's just a series of dates and names, things like that. So I think I could get more out of a museum that didn't approach history from that perspective, but approached it from a more thematic perspective. For example, taking the point of view of a foreign visitor like me who has plans to travel around Vietnam, well, what would this person like to know? So, for example, there could be a gallery, an exhibit about the history of the Vietnamese language, the written script, and the spoken language. How did it develop over time? What were its origins? And what led to the modern Vietnamese we have today? That would have been an interesting exhibit. What about religion? What has happened in terms of religion on this landmass, the people of Vietnam? And next exhibit about music, musical instruments. So, I mean, I went to a history museum of Vietnam, but at this point, I don't know anything about the music. I don't know anything about religion. I don't know anything about culture. I don't know anything about food. I don't know anything about agriculture. How has agriculture developed over the millennia here in Vietnam? So even though I went to a museum and spent hours there, after I left from the museum, I don't really know anything new other than what I've already talked about, the bronze drum, the Nguyen dynasty, things like that. So I often judge a museum based on how the museum makes me feel. Do I feel smarter after I visited the museum? And for this one, I did feel a bit smarter, but not by a whole lot. So it didn't really teach me a lot, but I still enjoyed the experience very much. The building was fascinating, the exhibits were interesting, and I found just interacting, well, not interacting, but being around other foreigners quite interesting, because I haven't had that experience for a long time. There's quite a large amount of tourism here. I'm told that there's a ton of tourism in Malaysia, that Malaysia is a big tourism destination and so many millions of foreigners go there every year, but I'm not really aware of them. I don't see them anywhere for the most part. If you go into downtown KL, Bukit Bintang, okay, you start to see a few backpackers, a few tourists, but on the whole, I felt like I was sort of in the country by myself with just sort of a scattering of YouTubers and backpackers and not that many people. But here in Ho Chi Minh City, particularly, I guess because I'm in District 1, there seems to be a huge tourism industry. So when I was at the museum, tour groups would roar through, buses would pull up outside, and a group of 50 people with a guide with a flag or a megaphone or something leading the group would march them through the museum. And then all these tourists, whether from Germany, from China, from whatever country they're from, I found myself surrounded by all these large tour groups. And I had the same experience at the War Remnants Museum as well. And it was kind of a new experience for me, and I was a little bit freaked out by it, particularly by the European tour groups. And I think most of the ones that I saw there, if I'm right, they were from Germany. They could be from Austria, but anyway, I think people around me were speaking German, and the tour guides, they were Asian. They had Asian features, but they were all speaking German, which was kind of interesting. And I say I was a little bit freaked out by them because they had such an unusual energy. They came in as a group, and they would come into a room, for example. There was one room that had an exhibit about the coffins that I was talking about, the wooden tree trunk coffins, and there was a display case of a mummified woman that had been discovered, and she was on display there. And then when the German groups came into that room, man, they were aggressive about it. They all needed to get a photo as close up as possible of this poor mummified woman. I kind of felt sorry for her because it felt like her privacy was being invaded. I can't help it. If I go into a room like that, I end up feeling very respectful. I stay away from the coffin, and I quiet down, and if I do take a picture, I might kind of get a wide one of the whole room, something like that. Maybe I'm telling a lie there because I think I did take a close-up picture as well. But there was something about the way the Germans did it. They just didn't take the time to absorb the room, read the things, think about where they are, and then sort of take a picture. They came into that room, rushed the coffin, and were like leaning right up against this glass case, and then they're like putting their chest right up against it and then holding their camera up above it. And then these other Germans were sort of giving them directions, like, no, no, this way, and it struck me as a little bit disrespectful, I must say, and a little bit aggressive. And there was a mixture of people, some older people, and they all looked like they just stumbled out of bed. Like they were elderly in their 70s and 80s. A lot of them had difficulty with mobility, even moving. They were moving very slow, and they were kind of big, tall, fat people, a little bit overweight, and they were wearing what looked to be drapery, like bathrobes almost, like they were still wearing their pajamas. And then they still had young people in the group too, and the young people were sort of at the extreme end of that opposite end. I saw people with legs that were solid tattoos from thigh to toe, just one solid tattoo on one leg. The other leg completely bare, but the second leg was just nothing but tattoos from top to bottom and all the way around, and then the piercings and the blue hair and just, I don't know, it was like, I was kind of freaked out because I wasn't accustomed to being around these sorts of Western people, the extremes of Western society like that. And that, I did find that kind of interesting to be around all of these tour groups. And at the end of my museum tour, I found myself right at that tea shop, and it was a lovely little tea shop, very nicely appointed. The decor was extremely nice, and you had a selection of various types of hot and cold tea, special Vietnamese tea. The woman there seemed to know a lot about the teas that she was serving, and I ended up getting a bubble milk tea. I didn't know I was getting that. I just ordered milk tea, iced milk tea. I wanted something cold and I wanted something big. And then as I started drinking it, I realized, oh, it had bubbles in it. So it was like a bubbled milk tea. And then me being a dummy, as I was leaving, I was so impressed by this bubble milk tea. I wasn't expecting it. I really love bubble milk teas. I love chewing on the bubbles. And as I'm leaving, I brought my cup back up to the counter. I cleared my own table, as I like to do. I don't like to leave a mess behind. And I cleaned off my table, and I brought it up to the woman, gave her the cup, and then she said to me, "What did you think of the tea?" And I started talking about it, and I said, "I really love that. I thought that was really good. I love your tea shop. I think this is a lovely place." And then because I'm a dummy, I then went on to embellish my story by saying, "Did you know I used to live in Taiwan, and in Taiwan, they invented the bubble milk tea. Most people agree that that is where bubble milk tea came from." And I'm getting very fancy with my story, but the woman didn't like my story because, of course, she misunderstood, and she thought I was saying that the tea came from Taiwan, and she was a little bit affronted by that. She's like, "No, no, 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 no. It's Vietnamese tea. That's the whole point of this place. It is." And then she started showing me all the exhibits and showing me the containers and the signs. "This is a special tea that comes from this region of Vietnam. Don't you dare tell me that our tea is coming from Taiwan. No, sir, this is the best Vietnamese tea that you can get." And then I'm trying to explain, "No, no, no, no. I didn't mean the tea. I meant the concept of bubbles, tapioca balls in the tea, bubble milk tea, that originated." But no, once you get a misunderstanding like that, you can never, ever resolve it. You cannot backtrack to the beginning of the misunderstanding and clear it up. It's related to what I talked about at the beginning about conditionals. When you're dealing in any language at a basic level, conditionals are impossible. You can't talk about ifs at all. Forget about if. You can only talk about basic facts. And once you have a misunderstanding and you start talking about the past, no, what I meant, what I said was, once you're going in the back, going into the past with a past tense, no, I didn't mean that. What I said, what I meant was, no way. You're never, ever going to get dug. You're not going to dig yourself out of that hole. So all I could do in that case was say to her, oh, I understand. Oh, this is tea from Vietnam. Oh, now I get it. And she was very satisfied that I corrected myself. And I appreciated that this was the finest tea that Vietnam has to offer. It has nothing to do with Taiwan. So we were friends again after that. And then after I left the museum, I took a local bus again to come back to my neighborhood, and I enjoyed that experience quite a bit. I had to do a bit of walking to get to the bus stop, and there was a little bit of confusion about was the bus I wanted going to eventually come or not, but it did. And I waved it down again, and the guy pulled over, and same thing, I had 7,000 dong ready, and he gave me 1,000 change. So the fare seems to be 6,000, not 7, but maybe it depends on how far you go. I'm not sure. I feel like I've been talking for a very long time, longer than I intended, but I'll continue with my stories. I'll put in chapter titles, and if anyone is interested in my story, you can jump from section to section, I hope. So this next section is about another day. The next day I went to the War Remnants Museum, and I had been planning to go to this museum for quite a few days. It was going to be the very first place I went, but every time I planned to go there, something else came up. And then when I had the opportunity finally to go to a museum first thing in the morning, I thought, oh, you know what? The War Remnants Museum is all mainly about the French Indochina War and then the American Vietnam War, and that's modern Vietnam. And I thought maybe I should go to a history museum first, get ancient history out of the way, and then I might be able to appreciate the context of the modern wars of the 20th century better. So I went to the History Museum first, and then the next morning I went to the War Remnants Museum. I decided to go there as early as possible. I read that online that it can get very busy later in the day. It can also get extremely hot. So it's best to go as early as possible. And it opens at 7:30 in the morning, which is pretty amazing. So I went there as early as I could. It's about 2 kilometers away, and I decided to walk there. I had a very interesting walk to get there, and I went through a park, and that was quite interesting. Beautiful park. And that is something I've noticed about Ho Chi Minh City. They do have a number of very attractive city parks here. Very green, very lush, old trees, big towering old trees. And the parks that I've seen have been very livable. I mean, I've been to cities around Asia that have parks, and yet somehow when you go to the park, you don't actually feel it that much. It's just an empty space, maybe some grass and sidewalks. And I don't know, you just don't have a feeling like you're in a really nice park where you want to hang out. And the park that I went through, or the parks that I've been to here in Ho Chi Minh City, are a little bit more natural. Bigger trees, rougher little environments. You feel like you're in a forest almost. And then the trails have a nice curving, winding feeling about them rather than straight edges. We're not talking about cement sidewalks that go in a straight line and then turn 90 degrees and go this way. Everything is sort of curvy and windy, and you feel like you're strolling through a forest. And I went into this park, relatively early in the morning because I was trying to get to the museum before 8 o'clock. So this would have been 7:35, 7:45 I was in the park. And it was still pretty active, and that's always fun to see all the local people there. These parks are really busy early in the morning. Aerobics classes, dance classes, people running, people speed walking. A lot of retired elderly people doing stretching exercises, swinging their arms and bending and twisting in all directions. And they have a lot of exercise machines. And I'm accustomed to seeing these exercise machines in parks. I saw them all over Thailand, for example, but I never saw anybody using them. But the ones here in the parks in Ho Chi Minh City, they were all occupied. Everybody was using these machines and doing all the exercises that you're supposed to do. So it was a lot of fun to walk through the park. So I tracked down the War Remnants Museum, and I'd been to this museum before, decades ago when I went there, and I have photographs of that visit. And but what I saw today or this week struck me as quite a bit different. They've modernized to a big extent. So it really was, it felt like I was going to a brand new museum that I had never seen before. It felt very unfamiliar to me, except for a couple of small things. I remember seeing all the weaponry long ago, the Huey helicopter, the machine guns, and then there was a big pile of unexploded ordnance. They have them all labeled and divided up. These are the 5,000-pound bombs, the 2,000-pound bombs, the 500, the cluster bombs, all the different types of bombs that they dropped on Vietnam. They have these all on display. And I remember taking pictures of those, and those are all still there. But they're also very modernized. I'm pretty sure this didn't exist when I went to the museum decades ago, because I walked up to the big pile of bombs. They had all been painted the same color, which I thought was kind of odd. But anyway, there they all were. And then there was a big screen, a digital screen on the wall, and then a platform in front of me with buttons. And I thought, you can push the button associated with each type of bomb, and then it will start a video on the screen and tell you about that bomb, which I thought was kind of cool. So I played around with that for a little while, pushed all the buttons. Unfortunately, the digital screen was a bit burned in, and you couldn't read anything. It had some English text describing the bomb, how it was made and how it was dropped and the damage it did, things like that. But I couldn't read any of it because the screen was kind of in poor shape. But it didn't really matter. They had a lot of graphics showing the bomb in action, how it worked, how it fell through the air, how it exploded. So it's a lot of, if you're interested in weaponry and munitions, you could learn a lot from that. And in the courtyard, for me, was probably the most interesting part of the museum, which was the display of weaponry. So they had the Huey helicopter, as I mentioned. They had a giant 2-rotor Chinook, the heavy lifting helicopter that they used in the Vietnam War. They had one of those there. They had tanks, mobile artillery pieces, jet fighters, reconnaissance aircraft. They had them all there, and they're all in extremely good condition. And they had nice labels on each of them with technical information about each one, and you could walk all the way around all of this weaponry, get a close look at it, take all the pictures you want. And I was going to do a Planet Doug sort of thing and take 10 different types of video and photos, do my GoPro stuff while I'm narrating, and then do a time lapse. And then I was going to get out my 360 camera and try to get some artistic 360 shots. But I was saved from myself, because after the end of my museum tour, I got a message from a friend of mine who said, "Hey, I'm nearby in a coffee shop. You want to come join me?" So when I was just about to do all my fancy video, I thought, yeah, I don't really need all that fancy video. It's just going to mean hours and hours of editing work. So I went to go meet my friend for coffee. So I was saved from my own worst instincts. But after I toured around the courtyard, looked at all of that, there was a display at the far end. From a distance, it looked a little bit unimposing or even uninteresting. And I think a lot of people don't even know it's there. I noticed a lot of people just looking at the helicopters and the tanks and the jets and then going straight into the main building, and then I think they would leave. And this exhibit off to the side, a lot of people didn't seem to even be aware of it, because all I saw from a distance was a door that said tiger cages. So if you want to see a tiger cage, come here, go through this door, you will see a tiger cage. And I thought, oh, I think a lot of people see that and they go, nah, I don't really need to see that, and they go into the museum. But I'm a bit of a completist. I have to see everything. And so I thought, okay, now I've got to go look at the tiger cages. And in my video, I did mention, I found that kind of interesting, because we are talking about a museum that has its origins in propaganda. The original name of this museum was not War Remnants. It was more like the war crimes of the Americans and their puppet allies. It was basically a propaganda museum to portray the Americans in the worst possible light and put all of their war crimes on display. That was the origins of this museum. And then over time, Vietnam and the United States normalized relations, and then the museum became more and more of, it drifted away from its emphasis on war crimes and atrocities and more about the history of the war itself. Though, to be honest, it's still pretty much a propaganda museum from the Vietnamese side of the war. And if you take that into account, you can get a lot out of visiting the place. But you definitely get that impression. But anyway, because of this origins of it as a propaganda anti-American museum, when I saw tiger cages, I thought, oh, that's kind of weird, because the Americans were not known. I didn't think the Americans were known for tiger cages. I thought of that as a uniquely Vietnamese thing, so that if you watch American war movies like The Deer Hunter, you see American prisoners of war being held in tiger cages and being tortured by the Vietnamese. So I always thought of tiger cages as being a Vietnamese thing. So I thought, so why at this propaganda museum are they showing the Vietnamese torture methods? But I thought, oh, I better go check this out. And I found out that what they meant by that is, well, these were the tiger cages used by the South Vietnamese. These were the American puppets. So even though it was a Vietnamese thing, these cages that they built and kept prisoners in, they were showing them as the American puppets, the South Vietnamese forces. They used these tiger cages. Anyway, so that made a bit more sense to me when I went in there. But then what I discovered was that, no, this wasn't just one tiger cage on display. It was actually a mini museum all about the history of the prisons that developed during the liberation wars with the French and the Americans. So there was a lot of information in there. So you did have the tiger cages, all kinds of them, different types of them. A French guillotine was on display. There was a mock prison. So they actually they built a mock prison showing how the prisoners were held, and then the various torture techniques that were used to get information out of them. And then there was a big exhibit room filled with photographs, like all the normal things you would think of as making up a museum. Photographs and documents, things to read, video. So it was basically, as I said, a mini museum inside the overall museum. So there's a lot more there than I thought there was, and I spent a long time going through it. But as I did say in the video as well, I don't know if I'm going to keep it in my final video, I did come away from that prison exhibit with a little bit of an odd feeling, because the overall tone, again, was trying to convey to you about how the war crimes that the Americans committed and the French, the executions by them, the torture by them, the prison system they used. And yet, to be honest, when you go through the entire exhibit and look at all the photographs and look at all the documentation and look at all the names, you're going to see almost nothing to do with the United States. When you saw a soldier torturing another soldier, it was always a Vietnamese soldier torturing another Vietnamese soldier. When you saw an execution, it was Vietnamese executing Vietnamese. When you saw guards beating prisoners, throwing lime onto them, stuffing them into open air cages where they're baking in the hot sun, all this torture, all of this mistreatment, all the war crimes, in the photographs and the exhibits, it was all the Vietnamese doing it to other Vietnamese. They just happened to be on opposite sides of the war, the North versus the South. So I don't know, the whole idea of American war crimes, the message wasn't quite genuine after I went through all of it, because I was like, you know what? You say American war crimes, but in this exhibit, I see a lot of Vietnamese people torturing other Vietnamese people. So maybe it's not as clear-cut, black and white as you're making it out to be. And after the prison exhibit, I went into the main building. It has 3 floors, ground floor, first and second. Though oddly enough, the way it's structured, I think you're supposed to start at the top. I looked at the map very carefully, and I read about this somewhere online. That like, normally, physically, you go in at the bottom, and then if you just look at the exhibits as they show up, you would end up looking at the ground floor, going up to the second floor, and ending on the yeah, well, I always get first, second, third mixed up because I always think of the ground as the first. I just number them. But anyway, there's ground, first, second. So normally you would go in at the ground floor, walk up to the first floor, then the second floor. But if you look at the way the museum is structured, the first exhibit, exhibit number 1, is at the very top. I figured that out, so that's what I did. And it turned out to be very wise, because I think you have to conserve your energy in a museum where you can't see everything. You can't absorb everything. So you have to make sure you go to the important things first when your energy level is at its peak. And then as you get to the end of your visit, to be honest, you're running out of steam and you're just going to zip through the remaining exhibits. You just don't have enough energy for all of it. So if you start at the end, then you miss out on the most important things. So anyway, I was very careful to ignore everything on the ground floor and the first floor, and I went all the way up to the second floor, the very top. And then I went to exhibit 1, and I think it was called Historical Truths, which again instantly gave me a propaganda flavor, but basically it was a summary of the Vietnam War, but more from the Vietnamese perspective, where they were the good guys and everybody else were the bad guys, basically. But so I went through that exhibit. I went through all the exhibits on the second floor, then I went down to the first floor, and then the ground floor. And the ground floor consisted of a temporary exhibit all about the Battle of Dien Bien Phu between the French and the Viet Minh, and that was a major victory by the Viet Minh. They defeated the French. The French surrendered at Dien Bien Phu, and that battle took place 70 years ago this month. So you see a lot of things here in Ho Chi Minh City right now that are commemorating the 70th anniversary, because that battle basically ended the French presence in Indochina. So it was a very important battle. So they had a temporary exhibit there, and then they had another whole exhibit, mainly, again, kind of more propaganda, to be honest, that was about worldwide support for the Vietnamese as they fought against the Americans. So it was basically a display of newspaper headlines and articles from all around the world about the Vietnam War protests that were taking place worldwide at the time. Even in the United States, of course, on university campuses where students were protesting the Vietnam War. And that's what was down on the ground floor. And I was so tired by the time I got there, I just kind of zipped through those. I didn't really need to look at the worldwide support for Vietnam exhibits. I kind of look around. Yeah, I got the idea. And for Dien Bien Phu, I'd been reading a lot about it already. I've been reading a lot of articles online, and I had the story in my head. And this exhibit at the museum went into a lot more detail, but by that point I didn't have the energy to go into it all. So I went through it and I took everything in, but I didn't do a deep dive. All my deep dives were for the first exhibits, and then they had an exhibit, for example, that was quite interesting about, what did they call it? Requiem, something Requiem, because it was an exhibit of photographs taken by photojournalists who died. And it was the brainchild of two photojournalists who were injured in the Vietnam War, but they survived. And then they had this idea to put together a project honoring something like 133 reporters and photographers who covered the Vietnam War in person and died in combat. So I guess out of all of the thousands who came to Vietnam, 133 of them died while they were covering the story, and then their photographs were all gathered together in one exhibit. And this room showed some of their photos. Obviously couldn't show all of them. If you had all of the photographs of 133 photojournalists, you'd have tens of thousands of images, but there was a selection of them there. And I remember having a couple of reactions to that exhibit. One, I noticed, again, these are very obvious things, and I talked about it in my video. You go through the whole thing, and after the end of it, you stop and you go, huh, all men. I don't think I saw a single, well, there were a few at the end, but they were modern pictures, more about the aftermath of the war, not the war itself. But after the end of it, you stop and think, you know what? Men do the fighting, don't they? For the most part. I think there were women particularly in the North Vietnamese armed forces. You see a lot of that in the historical archive. But when you looked at all of these photographs, I was like, huh, all men killing other men. I don't think I saw any women at all, really. A couple, maybe. But it also occurred to me, and I'm wondering whether this is significant or not, that after I looked at all of the exhibits, it finally dawned on me that, all of these photojournalists were covering the war on the American side. So they were all embedded with American forces or with American allied forces, the South Vietnamese Army. I started thinking about that. It's like, well, what does that mean exactly? It's like, out of all these hundreds of photographs of soldiers fighting and dying and doing all these things that soldiers do, I don't think there was one single photo of a North Vietnamese soldier or a battle from their perspective. It was all from the American side. And it made me think about the Vietnam War a little bit different. I started to wonder. I don't know the answer to this question. I'm just raising it as a question. Out of all the thousands of photojournalists who flew into Vietnam to cover the war, did any of them do it from the North Vietnamese side? Were there any journalists on the ground in the North taking pictures, writing stories, posting stories in the world's media outlets, but from North Vietnam? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. It just occurred to me while I was there that, oh, you know what? This is all from South Vietnam. There's nothing here from North Vietnam. And it makes me wonder whether there's a massive historical archive of hundreds of thousands of photos and reels of video, all documenting the fighting from the North's point of view. Does it exist? Was it documented? I honestly don't know. So I had that, and the last thing I noticed about this exhibit was the progression in photography, because the war went on long enough that cameras and film and photography in general just got better and better. So you're starting off with very grainy, small black and white pictures, and then the very last photographs are like big, highly detailed, glossy color images. So camera technology actually got much better throughout the time period, which is interesting. But again, I was thinking about it from a technical point of view. I've been around long enough that when I was born, we were using cameras like the ones they used during the Vietnam War, shooting film. And now, of course, we have digital everything. And I started wondering, can you imagine if there was a war like the Vietnam War now, and it was being covered digitally? So much more content. And the photography itself would be so much better. Just in terms of the clarity of the image, the sharpness of it, and just the coverage in general. Final thing, I guess, oops. Thought I broke my reading glasses. The last thing I thought about in this exhibit was the importance, I never thought about this before, of the last roll of film, because you're talking about 133 photojournalists, and they were all killed in action, stepping on a landmine, getting shot, grenade, bomb dropping from the air. Something violent happened to them that killed them quickly for the most part, and all of them would have had 1, 2, or 3 cameras hanging around their neck, and every camera would have had a roll of film in it that they were shooting at the minute that they died. So that they were out there covering a battle, and they've got all these cameras with rolls of film in them, and then they're taking pictures, and then boom, they're shot in the head, or a grenade goes off, a bomb drops. Now they're dead. And in each of their cameras, there would have been the last picture they took in the last roll of film in their camera. And I never thought of that as being a significant thing before, but as you go through the exhibit and you're reading it, they mention it quite often, and they mentioned it often enough that it finally dawned on me. It's like, yeah, for every single one who died in battle, there would have been his last roll of film, and this would have been the last picture he took just before he died. And then, of course, as that body was recovered, somebody would know who they were, and they would take their camera, and then they'd have to remove the film and then get it developed, get it processed. And you wonder what kind of a journey that roll of film took. And I also wonder how many rolls of film were lost, because you're talking about a battle that was taking place. They were killed in battle. Well, they were covering the battle. They were not fighting. They were covering it with their camera. And then there would have been losses on both sides, and who knows how their body was recovered, when their body was recovered, what happened to their cameras. Were the cameras recovered, and if they were recovered, did someone think to remove the film and do it carefully, or did they just sort of open the camera because they're not familiar with photography and they expose the film to light? It's like, oh shoot, I just ruined that whole roll of film. Or did someone know enough to, or did they complete the pictures? Like, quite often, back in the old days, if I had a roll of film, it would have 36 images on it, and sometimes I might get to 30, and I just want to develop the roll. I don't want to wait, so I've got like 6 more pictures I can take, and I'll just go click, click, click. I'll take 6 more pictures really quickly just so I can fill up the roll. And you wonder whether other soldiers did that. I would think not, but maybe it happened. Anyway, it seems like there could be a lot of really interesting stories about the final roll of film and the final picture that each photojournalist took. Yeah. So I enjoyed that exhibit quite a bit. In the museum overall, if you go all the way down to the prison exhibit, and then the historical truths exhibit, the photojournalist exhibit, of course, all the famous photographs from this time period. Some of them we all know. the napalm girl, the young girl that after a napalm, she's running naked down the road. That photo is there, of course. And then you get into an exhibit about Agent Orange and all of the deformities that occurred because of Agent Orange, all the birth defects. There's a lot of photographs of that are very, very disturbing. And then there are a lot of photographs of the damage done by phosphorus bombs, napalm and phosphorus, a lot of burns, things like that. So this museum, again, because of its origins as a war crimes museum, as kind of a propaganda museum, they didn't hold back in what they were showing. They showed it. So when you've got the French guillotine, for example, there's the guillotine. You understand that it chops people's heads off, but in a normal, say, American or Canadian museum, that's as far as they're going to go. But because this is a museum in Ho Chi Minh City, no, right beside it is a big photograph of people holding up severed heads. You see all of this. You see the torture, you see the dead bodies, you see the burns, you see the birth defects, a lot of dead bodies everywhere, massacres, things like that. So I only mention that because if you go there with a family or something like that, you have to be aware that these are the things that your children are going to be seeing. And I noticed on Google Maps, a lot of people left reviews of this museum, and they talked about how difficult they found it to go through the exhibits. Like seeing all these things had an emotional impact on them, and they found it very hard to take. And I don't have that issue, so I wouldn't even have thought of it myself. Things like the guillotine with the severed heads, photographs, things like that, the birth defects from Agent Orange. I don't really have a strong emotional reaction to these things, so it probably wouldn't even have occurred to me to talk about it. But because I read about it on Google Maps, all the reviews, I thought, oh yeah, you know, if I were a different type of person and I had a family, and I don't know if I would bring my children here. But on one of the floors, this is quite interesting, there was a room dedicated to children. I saw it on the maps, and it had an unusual name. I forget the name now. But I thought it was a educational exhibit where children would learn about the Vietnam War. That's what I thought it was. But if I understand that room correctly, it was actually a place where you can leave your children while you go through the museum. So it's a place where it's like a museum daycare in a way. They could offer educational programs there to teach children about the war, Vietnamese children in particular. That wouldn't surprise me. But just looking through the windows, it looked like a play area where you could, if you wanted to, go there with your children, and then you could arrange with the museum staff, like, can our children hang out here while we go look at all of the gruesome photography, and then we'll come back and pick them up later on. So I think that might be a possibility there. I don't know for sure. I didn't ask anyone about it, but that was what I thought. So yeah, well worth visiting. I think it was 40,000 dong was the price, and there were no different prices, locals, foreigners. I think everybody paid the same price. There was some air conditioning when you went into the rooms with all the photographs. Those rooms seemed to be air conditioned to make sure the photos don't degrade, but a lot of it was pretty warm, pretty hot, so you have to be aware of that, which is why people recommend going early in the morning when it's still cool and not as crowded. But well worth visiting, absolutely. I guess a museum like that, you don't want to say I enjoyed it a great deal, but I did enjoy it. Yeah, learned a lot of interesting experiences when I was there. And out in the courtyard, they have a coffee shop. So after I finished with the museum, I went down there and had a cup of coffee, and I had a toast, cheese, egg, and ham toast. And that's when my friend sent me a message saying, hey, want to meet up at a coffee shop. So I was going to get out my 360 camera and I was going to go through the entire museum 1 or 2 more times and shoot everything again, but using the 360 camera and things like that. But luckily my friend intervened, and I don't have 2 hours worth of 360 video to reframe and add music to. But yeah, if I wanted to, I could always go back and then do a 360 video, something like that. But I don't anticipate doing that. Well, on to the next day and the next story. I decided to go to another museum, and this one was the Ho Chi Minh City Museum of Fine Arts. And it's relatively near my hotel here, like a kilometer away or something like that. And the story of that day began with another errand, because a Planet Doug subscriber set me up with a day tour. So next week on Tuesday, I'm doing an organized day tour, which I don't know if I've ever done one, to be honest. I'm thinking back, and I don't think I can remember one. If I have done one, it would have been such a long time ago, I have no memory of it. But basically, it's a boat tour of the Mekong River Delta. So it has a whole itinerary set up for the day. They pick you up at your hotel 7:30 in the morning, and I guess we're driving to a nearby city. It's maybe 2 hours away, hour and a half away by car. So it's going to be a big van full of everybody just like me, a whole bunch of other foreigners that signed up for the tour. And looking at the photographs online from this tour, they give everybody one of the cone-shaped hats that are traditional in Vietnam, and then everybody wears those hats all day. We'll see whether I wear mine or not. I'm not much of a hat guy, and wearing one of those Vietnamese hats would feel a little bit silly to me. But anyway, we'll see whether I'm in the mood for that or not. And then, yeah, they're just going to drive me around all day, which is right on the Mekong River, and there are some islands in the river that are famous for various reasons, and there are boat tours involved. We're going to head out onto the islands on these boats, and then go through some small rivers on canoes, and lunch is included, and we're going to go look at things like a bee farm and snake wine place and a temple, you know, the whole package of activities throughout the day. And then at the end of the day, they drive you back to your hotel at the end of the day. So it's from 7:30 in the morning till 5 at night. They drop you off back at the hotel. So a Planet Doug subscriber signed me up for one of these and paid for it, made all the arrangements. And then I was thinking about going to the tour company office just to touch base, because I don't like just sort of waiting for something to happen, and I don't want to just sit here until Tuesday morning hoping something will happen and then be waiting outside of my hotel at 7:30 in the morning and then nobody shows up. So my instinct is to go there, like not wait to be picked up. If I can figure out where their offices are, I'll arrange with them that I'll just come to your office at 7 in the morning and I'll be right there, and then I can get on the bus right away, right at your office. You don't have to come to my hotel. So I tried to track down their offices, and I got their address, and I went there on my way to the Fine Arts Museum. It was between here and the museum, but then when I went there on that street, I didn't see anything. There were no signs for this company, and as far as I could tell, that wasn't their location. So now I'm not really sure what's going on. But anyway, that was how the day started, and then when I couldn't find the place, I just kept walking, and I went to the Fine Arts Museum. Gorgeous building that it's housed in. I don't know what it used to be. I've only seen it referred to as a French colonial building. It looks like someplace where the king would have lived. A huge French colonial mansion sort of thing. And it's now the Fine Arts Museum. In fact, there were 3 or 4 buildings that were part of the museum as a whole. But the centerpiece was the main building you see when you come in through the gate. I think the entrance fee was 30,000 dong, 40,000, I think 30,000. And getting the ticket was no issue at all. So then I walked in, There was a little bit of confusion, Planet Doug style. It was mainly surrounding whether you're allowed to shoot video, of course. A lot of museums won't let you. And this is something that I've always been puzzled about, especially in the modern era of smartphones, that if you take out a GoPro and shoot video, they have a problem with that. And they'll say, no, 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 you can't take video with that. But of course, everybody visiting the museum has their smartphones out, and smartphones are actually, if it's a good smartphone, is actually a better video camera than my GoPro, because a GoPro is not designed for interior video. It's designed for action. The stabilization, durability, waterproof, those are the strengths of a GoPro. And in fact, all the people around me in the museum could take better quality video than I could using their smartphones. And yet when I went into the museum, I was actually told, you can't take video with that. I did at the beginning, and I shot a lot of video down on the main floor, and then I was on my way to the second floor. Well, I hate this numbering system. I was on the ground floor, and then I was on my way to the first floor, and I was taking video of an elevator. They had an old style wooden elevator cage that would be raised and lowered on these two poles. Amazing looking device. So I was talking about that and taking video of it, and then two security guards were going up the stairs on the other side, and they saw me talking and shooting video. And then he called across the stairwell, said, no, 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 no. And I didn't really know what he was talking about. As I talked about in the video, I often feel like I'm doing 10 things that are illegal. So for example, I wasn't sure whether I was allowed to bring in a knapsack or not, because there were lockers there, and I saw people putting their bags into the lockers. And there was a sign about that, but the sign kind of said bulky bags have to be put away. And my little day pack is not bulky. So I thought, And then when I went in, there was a front desk where there was nobody at the front desk. Nobody checked my ticket. Nobody said anything to me. So nobody told me to put away my knapsack. So I just went in. So I was going into the museum with my knapsack, holding my GoPro. And then when the guy was going, no, 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 I wasn't sure. Maybe he meant I'm not allowed to have a knapsack, or he didn't like the way I was dressed, or he didn't like the way I was speaking out loud, or he didn't like that I was shooting video, or maybe he didn't like that I was leaning over the railing to shoot video downwards. That was unsafe. Maybe you're not allowed to take photography in the stairwell, or you can't take video of the elevator. Who knows? I didn't know what he was saying no, 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 no about. But in the end, I just assumed he was saying no video, because that was the most logical thing. But then, yeah, he told me no video. But by that point, I'd shot more than enough video of the museum exhibits. I didn't really need to shoot anymore. And the only other time I shot video was up on the highest floor. There was an area at the back of the museum where you could go outside onto a connecting bridge. And from there, you're outside, you're in the open air, you're not inside the museum anymore, and you get a beautiful view of the building itself. So when I was out there, I fired up the GoPro and I talked a little bit and I shot video of the building. And then when I went back inside the museum into the exhibits, I just didn't shoot video anymore. So there was some confusion at this museum whether I could or could not bring in my knapsack, whether I could or could not shoot video, because I was shooting video in front of all kinds of people that worked at the museum where I bought the ticket. There were all kinds of security guards out there. I'm taking video of everything. I walked into the museum shooting video. Other staff members saw me shooting video. Nobody had a problem with it. But then partway through my visit, now the security guards told me, no, 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 you can't shoot video. So I don't know what the rules are. You just have to go in, take your chances, be considerate of other people, which I was. I would only shoot video inside one of the exhibit rooms when it was completely empty. I would wait until all the people left the room and I was in there by myself. And then I would turn on the GoPro and shoot a little bit of video, talk about whatever was on my mind. And if any other people came into the room while I was doing that, I just quickly turned off the video camera. So I was being very respectful and being polite and very quiet in there, so you don't have to speak loudly. And with my Rode microphone, I can just speak in a very, very low volume. So I was being as nice as I could be. But in the end, the artwork was interesting. Art is always interesting. But for me, the building was even more interesting, just to walk around this huge colonial building with the hallways and all the connected rooms, the doors connecting the rooms, the stairwells, the outdoor balcony area, the windows, like huge balconies, giant stained glass windows, doors that open, go out onto the balcony, and you can see the world out there. And yeah, the elevator I already mentioned, fascinating old elevator. So it was worth the price for me, paying 30,000 dong just to see the elevator would have been worth it. And then to see the entire building was worth it. And then on top of that, you also got to look at all of the artwork. So I enjoyed that quite a bit. And then for some reason, I got it into my head to go to a gourmet burger place for lunch. Originally, I had all kinds of plans for local Vietnamese food, but I don't know, I saw this Marcel gourmet burger outlet just around the corner from the museum, and I thought, you know, I could go for a burger and fries. I really could. So that's where I ended up going, and it's quite a bit more expensive than typical local food would be, but I thought I would do it. It had a French theme. The name Marcel, I assume, comes from Marcel Marceau, the famous French mime and actor and performer. And it's a gourmet place. All of their beef, they said, was 100% Australian grain-fed beef or grass-fed beef. I don't know which is the better one. Whatever's the better one, that's what they said they had. And they make all their own bread. French brioche, like the buns were not normal standard American-style burger buns. They were actually French brioche. And the burger and the sauces, everything had a very delightful flavor and a thick patty. Everything was great. I loved it. Delicious burger, great fries, delicious Coke over ice. Nice interior. It looked a little bit like a movie theater, keeping up with the Marcel Marceau theme, and a bit like a 50s diner decor on the inside with leather seating in booths. You sit in booths with other people. And yeah, enjoyed it quite a bit. 160,000 dong for just the burger, 260 for the combo, burger, fries, and a drink. And as I was joking on the video, you can assess the value of everything based on how many banh mi you could get. So if the burger is 160,000 dong, for 160,000 dong, you could get about 7 good banh mi. So one burger, one sandwich, basically, or 7 sandwiches, which is the better value for you. And if you're in the mood for a gourmet burger experience and the gourmet burger flavor and ingredients, well, yeah, it's worth 160,000 dong. But if all you want is to fill up on as much food as possible, get the most food for your money, then you're better off going the local route and just getting pho and banh mi, things like that. And you can probably get 5, 6, 7 times more food for the same amount of money. It won't be gourmet burger food, but you'll get filling food, and you get a lot more of it for the same amount of money. But anyway, for whatever reason, I ended up with a gourmet burger from Marcel. And then I ended the day. I already knew I was going to do this because it was Friday, and it was a Friday night. I wanted to go to the walking street. I can't pronounce the name of this walking street, but it's very famous. Everybody knows about it. and it's about 2 blocks away from my hotel. When I was up on the 5th floor in room 502, I had a big window that looked out over the city, and I shot video of this light show happening, lasers and flashing lights on all the buildings, and that is coming from the walking street. And I thought on Friday night it would probably be pretty busy, pretty active, so I wanted to go there just to shoot some video. I didn't see myself joining the party in particular. I wasn't going to go there and go into the bars, go bar hopping and watch all they have all these women, scantily clad women dancing. Very beautiful women, by the way. Lovely to see as you walk along Walking Street. And they're all dancing to the music. At the outside of the biggest bars, there's one called Volcano, another one called Ocean, and then they're designed where you have all these tables and chairs on the outside, and then I assume seating on the inside. I never went into any of the bars, so I don't know what they look like on the inside, but between the outside and the inside there were several platforms in the window, and on every platform there would be a young woman in some sort of beautiful outfit or bikini, something like that, and she would be dancing to entice customers to come in. And I didn't go into any of these places. I didn't take a chair, I didn't take a seat to watch the dancing or get drinks there. I bought a couple of cans of cold beer from 7-Eleven, and then before I went into the Walking Street, I was talking about it, and I was getting my cameras ready, shooting a bit of video, and I just had a cold beer before I went. I was going to drink the beer as I walked through the street, but then I needed my hands free for all my camera gear, so I just downed the entire beer. I walked the entire distance of the Walking Street, and it was very fun. A lot of fun to walk through there. The music was so loud, though, that if I had gone there with friends, for example, and you want to sit down and have an evening out with your friends, I don't know how enjoyable that would be, mainly, especially in the main district, because the music is so loud, I would not be able to hear anything. So if I was sitting at a table with a friend, we couldn't have a conversation. All I would hear would be the pounding music, and I'd see their mouth opening and closing, but I wouldn't be able to hear anything that they said. And then I'd be screaming at the tops of my lungs, and they probably couldn't hear me. So basically all you could do is sit down, and then when the waiter comes, you just sort of point at something or scream as loudly as you can what it is you want, beer or cocktails, and then they bring you your drinks, and then you would just sit there and drink, watching all the people walking up and down the street, watching the women that are dancing, listening to the music. Some of the places had karaoke, others had live bands performing, things like that. But you wouldn't be able to sit there and have a conversation. You would just sit there silent, drinking and watching everything going on around you. And since I was there by myself, I didn't do that. I walked the entire length of the street from beginning to end, shooting video with my GoPro, hoping, I haven't even seen the video yet, so I don't know how it turned out. But with the GoPro, of course, I was aiming it in different directions, and then I would aim it at myself and talk a little bit if I came across a quiet section of the street. And just enjoyed it, absolutely enjoyed it. I loved the whole experience, listening to the music and just watching the scene, the whole party scene, everything going on, the dancing women, even the people that were walking up and down the Walking Street. There was a mixture of local Vietnamese out for the night with their friends, and then the women who were parts of those groups were also dressed up in their finery, very glamorous, very beautiful women. And then there were all the foreigners like me, the backpackers and the tourists, all of us in quite a weird assortment of clothing, of course, because we're all traveling and doing different things. But just to see the variety of people, see everything going on was a lot of fun. And then I got all the way to the very end, and I decided to go back through the street again, but this time with my 360 camera. And I had my 360 camera in one hand, and I had my phone in the other hand. So I was taking video, But since the 360 camera is filming everything all the time, I don't have to worry about where it's pointing. So all I did was hold the invisible selfie stick in front of me, and then I had my phone in my hand, and then I was just concentrating on taking pictures. So, and I just took wide shots. I wasn't doing photography. I wasn't getting close to any of the women that were dancing or anything like that. I wasn't taking portrait photography. I was just taking shots, wide shots of each bar and the street as a whole, all the people. And I walked all the way to the end doing that, shot video the entire time. This time I was smart enough to double check from time to time. So about halfway down the street, I pulled in the 360 camera. I could see, okay, it is recording, but then I saved the file and replayed it, listened, okay, it has audio, and I was getting good video, and then I just started recording again and extended it. Went all the way through, but on that trip through, I was a little bit distracted because I was taking pictures and video at the same time, and I had the camera set to vibrant, or not vibrant, whatever the bright, high-def vibrant setting is on the 360 camera. I just thought that would look better. But then when I got to the end, I rethought and thought, maybe that wasn't the best choice. So I changed the setting to just standard, and then I walked the entire length of the walking street a third time. And all I did that time was just move slowly and holding the 360 camera in the air and just taking video of the entire scene. In fact, I've got my laptop running right now. What I want to do is take one of those videos and export it as 360 video. I'm not reframing this. I haven't reframed it yet. I'm just exporting it as pure 360 video, and then I'll upload that to my Planet Doug 360 channel. And then anyone who watches it there, you can actually move your mouse around or move your phone around, and you can actually change the field of view within the 360 bubble. And then once I finish the 360 video, then I'll sit down and reframe it, and I'll use that video in a normal Planet Doug video. Though I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do about music, because there's music playing the entire time, and I'm pretty sure the YouTube computers are going to pick up on the melodies, know that it's copyrighted music, and I'll get copyright strikes or something. So I may end up having to, like for the 360 video, I'll just keep the audio as it is. That channel isn't monetized. It doesn't matter if the video gets claimed by a music company, which it certainly will be. But for Planet Doug, I'll probably delete the audio track and just put music over top of it, YouTube music, and then it'll be a little bit weird having the scene as it unfolded, and you kind of know what kind of music would be playing, but then I'll just play YouTube music over top of it, so it's going to be a bit weird. But it's either that or have music companies just claim the video and say, okay, that video you just spent 8 hours editing or 16 hours editing and uploaded to YouTube, that's our video now, thank you very much. They can just claim the whole video because a little bit of their music is playing in the background, but hey, that is the way the world works on YouTube, so we'll see what I end up doing. But yeah, I enjoyed that quite a bit. I was, as I said, I didn't sit down anywhere, I didn't hang out, but I was still out there for a long time, and I don't think I was back in my hotel room till after midnight, and then I was still up until past 1 a.m. just copying the video files and making sure I saved everything that I needed to save and charging up all the batteries and that sort of thing. So it was a little bit of a late night for me to be out that late and then staying up until 1 in the morning. And today, you know what I've been doing today. I've been changing rooms and I've been editing video. All morning long I was editing video before I changed rooms. And then I've been recording this behind the scenes video, which I didn't plan on doing, but I thought I had an extra hour to kill. I think I've stretched this out into 2 hours of me talking, but I had a lot of days to talk about. And yeah, I think that's pretty much all the stories of everything I've been doing, more or less. I can't tell everything, obviously. If I talk about everything that I've done here, it would just go on and on and on. Those are just some of the highlights. And tomorrow I have kind of a big day planned. Another Rod, who I already met here, my very first day here, I met a fellow Canadian named Rod. We met for lunch and did a bus tour. He contacted me and suggested we get together tomorrow, which is Sunday, and he has a whole bunch of places lined up that he thinks I should experience. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to meet up with him, have lunch, do some walking around. There's some kind of an Australian food festival happening at a park. So we're going to go there. We're going to go to the famous Book Street. Maybe we'll go to Little Japan. I don't know if that's on our agenda or not. A whole bunch of things. And that's what I'm doing tomorrow. And then Monday will probably be a video editing, hanging out in my neighborhood day. And then on Tuesday, I'm doing the day tour to the Mekong River. So yeah, busy, busy, busy. So how is my 360 export? This is going to take forever. It's already it's been busy there for 2 hours maybe, and I've got 23% finished. So it's probably going to take the rest of the day before it finishes. Yeah, I was chatting with a friend of mine, Daryl from Wander Eats, about some of my computer problems, because I exported a video the other day that took forever to export, took hours and hours and hours to upload. And then after hours of uploading, at the very end of the uploading, it just said, error. YouTube can't read this video format or something. There was an error. We cannot process this video. So basically, I was stuck. And I ended up having to re-edit the entire video, try to remove things that I thought might be causing the problem, re-export the whole thing and re-upload the whole thing. And it essentially took the entire day to redo what I had already done on the entire previous day. And stuff like that happens to me all the time. The technology is such a problem. And right now, my laptop is busy exporting a 360 video. And for all the hours that it's going to be working, I can't edit. I can't do anything else. So I was joking with Daryl, I need 2 laptops. And it's not really a joke. If I had the ability to afford and to carry 2 laptops, I probably would, because you need 2 workstations. You really do. While one laptop is occupied processing, exporting a video, then you can do editing on the other laptop. And you almost need 2 machines operating simultaneously. So I was joking, but at the same time, I honestly wasn't joking. I really could use 2 laptops. Or these days, tablets have gotten so super powerful that everybody talks about how you don't need a laptop anymore. You can edit video on a tablet. But I've kind of gone down that road before, but with the tablet that I do have, but it doesn't really edit video properly. It's not the same as a laptop. But maybe new, more powerful tablets can do it, and that would be interesting. But anyway. So yeah, with that, end of my thoughts for today, and I'm going to enjoy the rest of my coffee, wait until my 360 video finishes exporting, move on to my next little project. And with that, I'm going to shut down behind the scenes for today, and as always, I'll see you in the next video.